On World News Tonight.
Violent crash. At least 10 have been killed in an Australian bus accident with many victims in serious conditions. Trump lashes back. Former US President Donald Trump rallied against the special counsel and the Department of Justice. What accusations did he make? Find out tonight. Locking horns. China and South Korea enrolled in a diplomatic face-off over China's recent comments on South Korea's foreign policy on the prior. And Manchester is blue. The treble-winning Manchester City team arrive home with UEFA Champions League trophy amid celebrations from fans and supporters alike.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Anuradhi Vikramasinghe.
A very good evening to you all this Monday night, and this is World News. Now, there was a tragic bus accident in Australia. At least 10 people were killed and 25 were injured after a bus carrying a group of wedding guests crashed in Australia. Police in the eastern state of New South Wales said the accident in the picturesque Hunter Valley wine region took place near Greta, about 180 kilometres northwest of Sydney. The coach reportedly rolled off a ramp at a roundabout on a foggy night, although the fog had not been identified as a cause of the crash. 2 of the passengers were airlifted from the scene of the crash by helicopter, Chapman added. Footage showed that the light-coloured coach lying on its side after the accident with a dozen emergency workers wearing high-visibility yellow vests working nearby. The coach driver, a 58-year-old man, was taken to hospital where he underwent mandatory testing. He is expected to be charged over the accident. The Hunter Valley and its vineyards are a popular location for short breaks and weddings. A local mayor said the bus that crashed had been travelling from a wedding reception at a nearby wine estate. The area is being examined by specialist forensic police and a crash investigation unit. The 2 worst bus accidents in New South Wales were head-on collisions within 2 months of each other in 1989, which killed 35 and 21 people each. 18 people died in 1973 when a tourist bus plunged down a slope after a brake failure. South Korea and China have been seeing rising tensions in the past few days. Both countries have summoned each other's ambassador after a recent controversy sparked by the Chinese ambassador's remarks over Seoul's policy on China.
China has expressed strong dissatisfaction towards South Korea following last week's meeting between the Chinese ambassador to South Korea, Shin Hai-min, and South Korea's opposition party leader, Lee Jae-myung. In a statement on Sunday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that its assistant foreign minister called in South Korea's ambassador to Beijing, Chung Jae-ho, and conveyed Beijing's serious concern and dissatisfaction over Seoul's, quote, unfair reaction. This comes as tensions between the 2 countries have been rising after the Chinese top envoy to Seoul criticized the Yoon administration's foreign policy being focused on the U.S., saying that it was wrong for Seoul to bet on China losing.
Some are betting that the United States will win and China will lose, but clearly this is a misjudgment.
In response, last Friday, South Korea's foreign ministry summoned the top Chinese envoy, warning that such remarks were absurd and provocative. Seoul's first vice foreign minister Chang Ho-jin said the remarks run counter to the Vienna Convention, as it can be considered as an attempt to intervene in South Korea's domestic politics. Under the Vienna Convention, an international agreement on diplomatic relations, sovereign countries have a duty not to interfere in a country's internal affairs. Separately, Foreign Minister Park Jin also strongly criticized Shing's remarks, saying that the ambassador went too far.
Japan will carry out a 2-week test operation to discharge the Fukushima wastewater. The plan is facing fierce opposition from local fishermen, as the trial could indicate that the release is imminent.
Starting Monday, Japan is carrying out a 2-week test run on the process of discharging nuclear contaminated water from the wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. This is according to Japan's local media, Fukushima TV, on Sunday, citing the plant's operator, the Tokyo Electric Power Company. During the test run, it will ensure the safety of the discharging process. Although there won't be any actual release, the start of the trial operations means a release could become imminent. Last week, Japan sent some 6,000 tons of seawater into a 1-kilometer-long underwater tunnel built in the nuclear power plant. This approach aims to mix the water, which has been decontaminated of all radioactive substances except tritium that's inseparable from water, with seawater and release it. Japan plans to have its water release system ready by the end of this month. A final report from the International Atomic Energy Agency on its inspection is expected in late June. Once everything is completed, Japan plans to release more than 1 million tons of contaminated water currently stored at the stricken power plant. Meanwhile, Japanese authorities are facing fierce opposition from local fishermen. Last Saturday, Japan's industry minister Yasutoshi Nishimura met with local fisheries representatives to seek their understanding for the plant release. Their representatives expressed grave concerns over the plan, saying the move is fueling anxiety about the future of fishing operations. To that, Nishimura said the government is to provide increased support to expand the consumption of fisheries products and that it will continue working to develop the nation's fisheries industries. Japan plans to release the contaminated water into the sea this summer, while pledging it would not dispose of the contaminated water without consent from concerned parties.
Former US President Donald Trump rallied against what he called the corrupt political establishment at the Georgia GOP convention, taking aim at the special counsel and the Department of Justice. The indictment, which was unsealed, accuses him of illegally taking classified national security documents with him to a Mar-a-Lago home when he left the White House.
Donald Trump lashing out again tonight at what he calls the weaponized Department of Justice and the special counsel now prosecuting him.
Everybody says this is a disgraceful indictment. It shouldn't happen. It was done for political reasons.
His anger expanding to include his own attorney general, calling former AG Bill Barr a, quote, gutless pig on social media, in response to this analysis of the historic 37-count federal indictment brought against Mr. Trump on Friday. Barr's criticism of the GOP's now twice indicted presidential frontrunner, placing him in a distinct minority of Republican leaders, most of whom have rallied to Mr. Trump's defense. Even Mr. Trump's top Republican rival vowing to take up the cause of taking on the DOJ.
On our watch, we will once and for all end the weaponization of federal power.
The defiant former president telling reporters this weekend he intends to plead not guilty on Tuesday and would never drop out of the presidential race, even if convicted.
An elevated section of Interstate 95 collapsed in Philadelphia after a tanker truck carrying flammable cargo caught fire, closing a heavily traveled segment of the United States East Coast main north-south highway indefinitely.
A part of I-95, a critical U.S. highway, collapsed in Philadelphia on Sunday. Officials said it buckled after a tanker truck carrying gasoline caught fire below a northbound overpass of the interstate. No deaths or injuries have been reported so far, but I-95 is the main north-south interstate for the East Coast, running from Miami to the Canadian border, with roughly 160,000 vehicles passing over the roadway every day. And a rebuild will take months, according to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro.
We expect it to take that time, and we will have that specific timeline set forth once the engineers in PennDOT have completed their review. To expedite this process and to cut through the red tape, tomorrow morning I plan to issue a disaster declaration, allowing the Commonwealth to immediately draw down federal funds and move quickly to repair and reconstruct this roadway.
Officials say the adjacent southbound overpass was also closed as a fire made it structurally unsound. Shapiro added that while there were indications that some gasoline may have spilled into the nearby Delaware River, booms were quickly put into the water to contain the spread. He stressed there was no threat of drinking water contamination. U.S. President Joe Biden was briefed on the collapse, and the White House has reportedly offered assistance. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said I-95's closure will have, quote, significant impacts on the region and the city of Philadelphia. Officials said travelers should expect delays as the overpass is rebuilt and encourage them to plan alternate travel routes for their commutes.
Let's go for a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back. Former Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon was arrested as part of an investigation into financial irregularities of the Scottish National Party. She was later released without charge pending further investigation.
Scotland's former First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, was arrested on Sunday in connection with a police investigation into the Scottish National Party's funding, her spokesperson has said. The probe is looking at what happened to more than £600,000 or $750,000 raised by Scottish independence campaigners in 2017. It was supposed to be ring-fenced, but may have been used for other purposes. Sturgeon's spokesperson said she had, by arrangement with Police Scotland, attended an interview where she was to be arrested and questioned. The spokesperson said Sturgeon has, quote, consistently said she would cooperate with the investigation if asked, and continues to do so, end quote. Earlier, Police Scotland said on Twitter that a 52-year-old woman had been arrested as a suspect in connection with the ongoing investigation into the funding and finances of the SNP. Sturgeon's arrest is deeply embarrassing for the SNP, which currently leads Scotland's semi-autonomous government and campaigns to end Scotland's 3-century political union with England.
To many across the country and in my party, it might feel too soon.
It follows her surprise resignation in February, when she said she had become too divisive to lead her country to independence. An SNP spokesperson said the party was fully cooperating with the investigation. In April, Sturgeon's husband, Peter Marrell, and the party's then treasurer were both arrested. They were then released without charge, pending further investigation as part of the same inquiry.
Over in Ukraine now, the country has claimed its first victories since its counter-offensive began, but Russia insists on successfully repelling the Ukrainian attacks.
Ukraine says it has taken control of 3 frontline villages in the western Donetsk region, marking its first major victories since its counteroffensives began a week ago. Footage on social media showed Ukrainian troops celebrating the villages they were able to take back. According to a Ukrainian military blogger, during a span of a week, Ukraine was able to take back around 95 square kilometers of territory. However, Ukrainian forces still have a long way to go before they reach Russia's main fortified defensive lines, including the southwestern part of Zaporozhye. Despite the claims of major victories in the 3 villages, Russia has yet to confirm the losses, instead announcing it had successfully repelled a number of Ukrainian assaults. Russia's defense ministry said Sunday that Russian forces had shot down a Ukrainian Su-25 fighter jet in the Kherson region, while adding that it had also repelled 3 attacks from Ukrainian forces in the Zaporozhye region. The ministry added that Ukraine attempted to attack one of its Navy ships in the Black Sea using 6 drones, but ultimately failed. Russia's state-run TASS news agency also reported that Russian forces destroyed Ukrainian howitzers and multiple rocket launchers. The news outlet also reported on a number of other successful military operations conducted by Russian forces against Ukraine to repel the counteroffensives. While it's still too early to say which side has the upper edge, according to the British Ministry of Defence's Defence Intelligence Department, Ukraine has carried out important operations in several key areas in the southeastern regions.
Ferrari won the centenary edition of 24 Hours of Le Mans after a late pit stop drama to take Maranello's first overall victory in 58 years and deny Toyota a 6th successive triumph in the world's oldest active endurance race. The number 51 Ferrari AF course, driven by Italian Alessandro Pierguidi, a car shared with Antonio Giovinazzi and Britain's James Calado, took the checkered flag ahead of the number 8 Toyota. It was Ferrari's first overall success at the South Circuit since 1965, when American Maston Gregory and Austrian Formula One driver Jochen Rindt won in a 250 LM car. But it was nail-biting to the end. Guidi failed to get going from the final stop, the Ferrari remaining immobile as Toyota mechanics looked on in disbelief, wondering if a stunning victory might, after all, be snatched from impending defeat. The Italian started after a reset, but the Ferrari's lead was slashed to 51 seconds before the number 8 Toyota's final pit stop. Ferrari started with both the 50 and 51 cars on front row, a first in 50 years for the marque that waged epic battles with Ford in the 1960s before leaving in 1973 and then returning this year to the hypercar category. Heavy clashes and artillery fire erupted across Sudan's capital Khartoum on Sunday, and residents reported airstrikes soon after the end of a 24-hour ceasefire that had brought to a brief lull to 8 weeks of fighting between rival military factions.
After 24 hours of calm in the streets, shelling and fighting picked up again in Khartoum. The ceasefire agreed by US and Saudi mediators allowed civilians to get humanitarian assistance. But with stocks running low, residents struggled to find food and essential supplies.
The stores are empty and all kinds of goods are in short supply. The surrounding grocery stores have long been out of goods. Plus, the hospital is closed and there is a severe shortage of medical resources. This is the biggest problem we face right now.
This is the latest truce in a series of failed attempts to stop the violence between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces paramilitary group, with the United States imposing sanctions on both rivals. Army Chief Burhan and Rapid Support Forces Commander Dagalo fell out over military restructuring plans in the country's transition to civilian rule, following the ousting of President Omar al-Bashir in 2019. The conflict broke out on April 15th in Khartoum and in the western region of Darfur, displacing almost 2 million people, with many seeking refuge in neighbouring countries like Egypt and Chad. The UN estimates the fighting has left 25 million people, the equivalent of over half of Sudan's population, seeking humanitarian aid.
Welcome back, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute.
Ducati's Francesco Bagnaia extended his lead at the top of the MotoGP World Championship after he rode to victory at his home Italian Grand Prix for his second sprint race double of the season. Bagnaia was joined on the podium by the two Pramac Racing drivers George Martin and Johan Zarco, while VR46 Racing's Luca Marini was fourth, as four Ducatis finished in the top four in their home race in Mugello. Montenegro's Democratic Party of Socialists and a group of small allied parties stated that according to their own vote count, they won one more seat in the parliamentary election than the Europe Now movement, which is leading according to pollsters. The Kilauea volcano on Hawaii's Big Island erupted early on Wednesday morning, and lava flows are currently confined to the surrounding crater floor. Kilauea last erupted in January, with activity stretching into March. Russian state television showed a US musician and former paratrooper appear in court locked in a metal cage after his arrest in Moscow on June 6th over drug dealing charges. A statement or telegram messaging app by Moscow's courts of general jurisdiction said Lake is accused of running a drug dealing business involving young people.
And that is all from us here at World News Tonight. Join us again tomorrow as we keep you up to date with the latest from around the world. In case you miss any of the stories tonight, you can always rewatch the whole program on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AldoTherana-English. We end off tonight in Manchester, England, which is painted blue as Pep Guardiola and his Manchester City team arrive back home triumphant after winning the Champions League. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.